Titan of Mediation, part two of an interview with Dr. Habib Chamoun-Nicholas, part of the series Manousso Musing with seasoned mediator trainer Dr. Barbara Manousso. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi again, everyone. Mac Pierre-Louis here, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Ołowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator from Warsaw, Poland.
And I'm Dr. Barbara Manousso, and I'm a mediator, arbitrator, and international trainer in arbitration and mediation. So we're really delighted today that one of the key elements of any mediation is negotiation. And we have with us Dr. Habib Chamoun-Nicholas. And Dr. Chamoun is a professor. He's been a businessman. And the big gift that he gives to the international community, especially in mediation or negotiation, are his writings. And this is one of his books that talks about the history of how negotiation has appeared and been used over the centuries. So Dr. Chamoun, Negotiate Like a Phoenician, Discover the Deal. It is outstanding. We require this book for our mediation students. And tell us, how clever were you that you thought to write this book and to bring this history into the reality of everyday mediators and anybody, actually?
Thank you. Well, I'm so happy to be back with you, and thank you for the invitation. This actually, how this book came about and why should we write another book in negotiations? You know, there are thousands of books there, and we always wonder, what is it to, negotiation like it is to ISO 9000 to quality? You know, you have like benchmarks to quality, ISO 9000, ISO 14000. So what is it for negotiation? How can we have a benchmark, a historical benchmark? And then what was the best practices in the history of mankind, right? And so we look at different civilizations, and we took a bigger look at, the ancient Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were actually probably the most famous negotiators in history, because everybody talked about them. The Greeks, the Jews, everybody will talk in the ancient historians, Herodotus, and so on. So they talk about the greatest Phoenicians, about how they trade, how they negotiate. So we actually look at in deeper, we did a research on that and find out that the best practices come from the Phoenicians. I mean, they were good, bad, and evil, but we took the best practices. Like any civilization, you have good, bad, and evil, right? So, and that's what we bring in this book, some examples from the ancient historians, from the Jewish scriptures, from the Christian scriptures. They talk about the Phoenicians. People don't know about it until we actually didn't even know. I asked my collaborator, Dr. Hazlett, I asked him, he didn't know anything about Phoenicians. He didn't know where the Phoenicians were. And then he did some research, because I wanted somebody that didn't know anything about it so that they can actually do research objectively. And we find out so many stories in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and in history about the Phoenicians, how they built the Temple of Solomon. The Jewish king actually built the temple, and the contractor, it was a Phoenician contractor. Few people know that. They think it's Jewish, but it's not. King Hiram. So anyway, we analyzed that great deal of ancient time and how it went about. And something came out of this, and it's interesting, linking the last chat that we have about the book Deal and how this come about. When we talk about deal, at the end we talk about leverage, right? And after leverage, we thought about what is it that makes one negotiation more successful than another one based on many, many negotiations. And there is one thing we observe. We call that tradables. Tradables are the things that make the difference between A negotiation and B negotiation and C, right? So, and that's what we define in this case, what tradables are. And then we found in history how the Phoenicians did tradables. And tradables are things outside of the deal that are not part of the deal and that can enhance deals in the future without expecting it, in a nutshell. That's what we wrote about in this kind of book.
To a degree, what transpires from that, and is absolutely fascinating, that those thousands of years ago, people were negotiating and they were closing the deals, and negotiating is as much needed nowadays. So, what links those old methods of negotiation together with those methods that we have today? Especially as this book became so popular and people were having so many deep reflections over that, especially when you bear in mind that today we live in a different world. We have so many means of communication. We have so many outlets where we can put information that we wish to negotiate or we don't wish to negotiate. What's the difference between negotiating then, negotiating now?
That's a great question. And in fact, if you think about it, the Phoenicians were great builders, right? So they will go all around and they were great ship builders and they will navigate all around the Mediterranean, which was the ancient world. Just think about that as internet today, instead or going in an airplane instead of going around by the sea, right? So in Phoenician time, they were always in chaos, in crisis. There were empires going up and empires going down, in decay, and so there is always been situations like today they used to have, like the world was in conflict all the time. And they, instead of fighting, they will negotiate with everybody around the Mediterranean. So what can we bring from the past of today to today environment is the wisdom of the past, because the wisdom of the past is what we lost today. Today we're in a more selfish environment where everybody's thinking just on their own, on themselves. And in the past, they collaborate. They actually build with the competitors. They will build a network, through the Mediterranean. So we need to get this wisdom that we are forgetting with all of this information around us. We forget the essentials, so we need to go back to basics. And that's what the book brings about. So coming back to basics, to the past. I mean, this has been written. The theory that we discover is because we actually research it and we analyze it, is like 4,000 years ago. So that means that humans, throughout history, they've been doing great things. We need to bring those great things, not the bad things. That's the point.
Yes, and I was mentioning earlier, in my studies over the years, I came across the works of G.K. Chesterton. He's a famous Catholic philosopher. One of his books is called Democracy of the Dead. And in it, the thesis is basically that um, wisdom and ideas should not just be looked at when they're coming from the minds of people who are living, but rather we should look for wisdom and good ideas across minds that are not living. Okay, democracy of the dead. And that people who foolishly try to say, you know what, people in the past didn't know anything, we are so much more progressive now, we're so much more advanced, we end up making some of the same errors that they did because we don't take the wisdom and the claims and conclusions that they reached, right? And so in mathematics and science, we revere the past because a lot of the bases of things that we have today are from cultures in the past. But when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to ideas like that, what makes good government, when it comes to things like this about negotiation, we can still get a lot of these ideas from the past. So I just wanted to make that point just because, again, a lot of your work keeps reminding me of things that, yes,
Mhm.
I feel validated, right? I've always concluded this before, but I needed somebody else to kind of, come along and bring it as well. But anyway, I think your work is salient. It brings to mind, the reason we need to go back in time and not look only to what we know today. One of the points you make that's in the prologue of your book is that the Phoenicians' biggest achievement was the alphabet that they spread
Mhm.
across the land at that time, and that was one of the criteria that made it a, that made them successful in record keeping, which then attributed to their success in negotiations. And can you talk a little bit about that? How the communication that we are having today in English, okay,
Mhm.
stems back on a basis of an alphabet that they invented. Can you
Mhm.
connect how communication,
Mhm.
works with negotiation?
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. Actually, and I will go back to that. I'll give three Nobel prizes to the if I wasn't I mean able to do it, to the Phoenician civilization. I'll tell you why in a second. But going back to your question, they actually, yes, the alphabet they generated, they donated to humanity. The Greeks will, they gave it to the Greeks, and the Greek gave it to everybody. But before that, they need to communicate with anybody, and they didn't know their language, so they use sign language, so they use nonverbal communication. So in negotiation, not only is important to use verbal communication, but also nonverbal gestures, body language, all of that. And the Phoenicians were can they actually master that, because they will go to Africa, and they didn't know the people, and they will. I mean, there are stories from Herodotus, about where they come, and they will come with the big shipment, and they will get all the merchandise outside of the shipment, and then the locals will come, the Phoenicians will go inside the ship, and then the locals will look at it, and they will bring some gold, leave the gold there without taking the goods, and then the Phoenicians will come down, the locals will not be there. So they look at the gold, they say, probably not enough. They didn't communicate it. They go back again, and then the locals will come back and put a little bit more gold, and then the process will continue until it was the fair price. So, in other words, they use nonverbal communication, and before. So, with the alphabet, that will help communicate record keeping, and negotiation without communication. It is very complicated. So you need to send some kind of sign of trust, of confidence to the other side, so they can trust you, and reputation, right, as well. So you build a reputation. It is known through history that the Phoenicians will come to any port in the Mediterranean, and the locals will be waiting like kids, oh, they like bringing the new toys, right? And they were always waiting there, so excited about looking out for the Phoenicians. So they will always bring some novel things, and so that's also connect to them. So connection, communication, expectations, that all helps. If they give you bad things, like you go and buy something, then you don't trust the seller anymore, right? So that happens in today's environment. So that's important. So I will say that the Phoenician civilization, and especially the best practices, in that time, I will give them at least three Nobel prizes. One of the literature one, because they gave the alphabet, uh, to everybody. The second one will be the economy, because the way they did business. Like, you can take an example, Malta, the country. Malta, it was actually founded by the Phoenicians, and the
Oh,
Maltese, they feel they are Phoenicians, because they're ancestors. However, they will go in there and they show them how to do business, to their clients, to the Maltese, instead of just conquering and taking all their lands and things, the old fashion, right? Or the new fashion as well, right? So they actually create wealth to their clients, and that's very important.
huh.
So that would be a second one. And the third one, the peace one, because the Phoenicians really were pacifists. They will go around and they will never attack unless they were attacked, you know, and and then we can talk in the future about this, but they were very resilient. like the Ukrainians, on today's environment. So I believe because of that, I will give them those 3 Nobel Prizes to the civilization. And they say, where are the Phoenicians? Where are they today? Maybe you asked me that question, right? They're all over. There was a Washington Post, study. They show that one out of 16 people around the Mediterranean, going all the way from Spain and around to Israel, Lebanon, and around North Africa, all around the Mediterranean, they have Phoenician descent, and around the world, right?
Where just for people who might not be geographically astute, where was the heart of the Phoenician civilization?
Well,
physically on the
yes,
map, yeah.
Yes, properly they call it Phoenicia proper. That was the origin. It was all the coastlines from Syria, Lebanon, and Israel today. The coastline, the people of the sea, but it's not the people of the sea that they call in the history books. There were other people of the sea. There were the Canaanites of the sea, because they're also Canaanites. But anyway, so that means where the coastlines of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel today. But it expanded all the way to Spain. If you go to Spain, you can go from Barcelona all the way to Cadiz, all the Levant, and they're Phoenicians. They have so much Phoenician history there. They found a whole Phoenician city in Cadiz, Spain, underneath a theater.
Wow.
So it is amazing. And then in Portugal as well, there is some Phoenician, history. And so that's the thing, that if you think about it, everybody that came from the Mediterranean, they have a Phoenician history in them. So I think that is a clearer map, right? I mean, all around the Mediterranean Sea, so you cover almost every country, from Europe to Asia, right?
Well,
And
that's interesting. That's
Mhm.
absolutely outstanding. I was always unclear myself, actually, to exactly where the heart or the seat of the Phoenicians are. So
Yes.
so what you've brought to this conversation, and it seems to be part of your book, that as far as negotiation is concerned, and tying it back to mediation, one of the elements is the preparation and what people bring to the table. Not
Mhm.
that there is something that will happen, it's what the people who are participating and who wish to get their favor, so to speak, and the preparation they bring. The Phoenicians built a language. They were resourceful, that they enjoyed travel, because if they were around these different waterways and different areas, so they're bringing something to the table. What would you say from all of this? And I know we're just looking historical, and there are many things, but what would you say is the most important preparation that people bring to to negotiate like a Phoenician? What would be your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, the first thing is the spirit of abundance. You bring to the table a spirit of abundance. In other words, and just in parentheses, the Phoenicians were called Phoenicians because of the purple color by the Greeks. The Greeks called them the purple. The purple, they brought it from the molluscos, of the sea. And so anyway, we can talk about Phoenicians for an hour, but just another fact, they circumnavigated Africa for the first time, the Phoenicians, and they believe that they came to America before Columbus, okay? And they have proven that, but there's still some facts to prove. But anyway, the interesting thing, I would say, the spirit of not being afraid, the spirit of abundance, meaning don't try to, shorten yourself when you're negotiating, because you go quickly to the deal and you start haggling, and don't do that. Try to understand the other side to the fullest. And that's the point, where you bring in a spirit of abundance. That's where the tradables come in. You figure out what needs the other side has that is not in the deal. Let's say he's having troubles because he's coming from Ukraine, so you're giving some assistance, right? So you help the basic needs of the other side first, then you go into the deal. That was typically the Phoenician negotiation. You don't go quickly to the deal. You try to understand what is wrong with this person. Is he sad? Okay, so let me help them. So let me try to cheer them up, and then you get into the deal. So the thing is that by satisfying a different level of need of the other side, you get a deeper link of relationship between the parties, and so that will be the biggest thing, I think, where they are more like the way they do the business rather than just quickly come and try to get it off and out. They generate a business for you. They help you with other things that they are not going to sell you. Is that clear? Because that's
Yes,
the essence.
That was a gift for anybody listening.
So,
Natalia, you seem to have a question a minute
yes,
ago, and I think
absolutely.
I stepped over you, and I'm sorry.
That's right.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. What I wanted to say is that I can see that now very clearly that for you, Dr. Chamoun, writing this book about the Phoenicians was also a part of studying your own roots.
Yes.
Because you have Lebanese roots, and the way that you were brought up by your parents being from Lebanon, even though in Mexico, was also very strongly emphasizing the role of Lebanese traditions and Lebanese approach to life. But I believe that the abundance of culture is also a personal feature, and a way when we negotiate, what we bring to the table is not just preparation, as Dr. Manousso has just said. We bring ourselves. And
Right.
this way you went back to the very roots of your culture, to all the wealth that you can gather from the previous experiences throughout not just centuries, but also thousands of years, is also something very important for us as mediators, negotiators, when we sit at the table with the people, to be aware of who we are and what we bring to the table. Not just the other party is looking for, or something like that. And the comparison you've just made about also reaching out to this person, how the Phoenicians did it, that also reminds me of many cultures that are still based, like Turkey or Morocco, when you trade something, there is a complicated process of rules and going in and going back and almost breaking these negotiations, that makes it very colorful. What can you say about, first of all, the personal experience, and then the cultural top that can be put on top of that when we as negotiators or mediators go to the table, and what we offer, what we put in front of people who are with us there to talk and negotiate?
For the culture, you're right. I mean, when I start going around, the world presenting the book the first time, a long time ago, I found a lot of Lebanese in the diaspora. They will tell me, "Oh my God, you did like auto-analysis of ourselves," and they actually, that to me was really something, interesting, because when somebody that is a successful business person, he read the book and he had this Lebanese origin, he said, "Oh my God, it's like you're describing me. You're describing my grandfather. You're describing that and that." And so I had that experience, and it was interesting because also the French told me this is the way we do it, the French. So they relate, I think they relate to the grandparents or to the parents. And that was really great and encouraging. And then my next question will be, how can we keep that? Because then the generations to come may not come like that, right? And I did some, as far as that, I did some survey of the Lebanese on the diaspora just recently, to find out how they feel. How do they feel this way, this other way? And it is very encouraging that even a third generation still feel proud of their roots. That's interesting, because you need to be feeling proud of whoever you are first. in order to come to the negotiation. And I think you hit the point there psychologically, because if the other one sees the reflection of what you are not proud of, you're sending all those signs, right, to the other one. If they feel you're proud in the good sense, right, then they respect you, no matter who you are, where you're coming from. So that identity is important for negotiation. One. The other thing I see is that I see the European cultures and the in general, they also feel this way. They feel like going back to the roots and coming with the good practices is fantastic. So I can see that where there is respect cross-culturally. And my students, they think that the Phoenician negotiation is a cross-cultural negotiation, really, because they went all over. So that means you respect all cultures. They were flexible. They respect women. 4,000 years ago, some of the professors that study that, they say that respect for women was key. Of course, they were 50% of the market and they were the clients, right? But that's okay, even then, right? So going back to your question, how do I feel? I feel that it was like self-analysis of other people as well when they read it. And to me, that was very flattering, because it sounded to me that without knowing, I'm analyzing the culture today. But so that means that, yes, and that comes to the next thing, it transcends, it goes to a next generation. And so that's important. I don't know if I answer all your points. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely excellent. And you brought up transcends is part of the title of your third book that we'll talk about next time that we have an opportunity to talk with Dr. Habib Chamoun-Nicholas. And your takeaways, again, for mediators or any negotiators or anybody, is that you have confidence in yourself, you know who you are, and not be afraid to ask and to bring to the table every tool you have to not feel uncomfortable, to have the confidence in the negotiation and to ask. Absolutely outstanding. I thank you very much for being our guest today as a titan of mediation in our Manousso Musing. And from Houston, Texas, and Newport, Rhode Island, I want to thank you very, very much for sharing your wisdom and your books with us today. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Dr. Chamoun, where can people get your book if they're interested in it?
Oh, you can write to hchamoun@me.com, and I can provide the links and things like that. Yeah.
And just for anybody who might want a quicker link to it, it's on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And they just need to type in "negotiate like a Phoenician" and you
Yeah.
will come up. All right.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you so much,
Thank you.
everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.